Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride. And in a moment, we'll be hearing from Kirsten Oswald, the SNP's Deputy Westminster Leader, and Elaine Whyte from the Clyde Fishermen's Association about the news around Brexit. But first, we hit you with today's top headlines. And we start, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. So as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 1,251,741 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK Government regional testing centres. Of these, 1,147,435 were confirmed negative, 104,306 were positive. There were 1,001 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today, and sadly 31 new reported deaths. Of course, this will be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will show symptoms and not everyone will necessarily get themselves tested. As always, we urge you, if you are showing symptoms of a new dry persistent cough, a fever, or a change in your sense of taste or smell, do please book a test as quickly as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, there were 999 people in hospital last night, 53 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 4,070. This number only includes those who died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. And unfortunately, we don't have up-to-date figures for the UK today. They're being slightly delayed in getting published, and we didn't have them before we came on air. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has told CNN that she thinks the chances of a trade deal with the EU is now almost vanishingly small. In an interview with Christiane Amanpour, Sturgeon said, "I think the chances of a deal now are almost vanishingly small. They're not non-existent, and I remain hopeful, I guess, because no deal would be catastrophic. But I'm starting to worry not just that no deal is now the overwhelming likelihood, but that Boris Johnson is actually now almost planning for that. Exactly a year ago right now, the UK general election took place, and he fought that election to be elected as Prime Minister, basically saying that his deal with the European Union was oven ready. He later said that no deal would be a failure of statecraft, and it was a 1,000,000 to 1 chance against that happening. Now today he's saying it's very highly probable. It seems to me that all of this is because Boris Johnson is failing to grasp or accept that responsible, independent countries in the modern world have to collaborate and work with others, and at times pool sovereignty for the greater good, for the greater well-being and prosperity of their populations." Meanwhile, SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown MSP has challenged the UK government to provide the same level of financial support for Scotland to cope with a hard Brexit as it is giving to Northern Ireland. The UK government has announced Northern Ireland will receive an extra £400 million to address the hugely damaging effects of Brexit on trade. But there has been no equivalent commitment to Scotland, which, based on the Barnett formula, should mean an extra £1.16 billion the Scottish Government could use to help protect Scots workers and businesses. The UK's customs system is not ready for the end of the post-Brexit transition, a House of Lords committee has said. In a letter to the Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove, the Conservative Lady Verma, who chairs the EU Goods Subcommittee in the Lords, said, "We are not confident that all the necessary technological, physical and welfare arrangements will be in place in time to avoid or mitigate significant disruption following the end of the transition period. Key customs IT systems, some of them going live at the end of this month, are still in development and testing. Similarly, construction of port and inland customs facilities is still ongoing and, in some locations, yet to begin. The degree to which those involved in UK-EU trade are aware of what they need to do differently is a critical unknown element, and the plans to protect the welfare of drivers stuck in what could be extremely long queues are insufficient. Amid this widespread uncertainty, the guidance provided by the government has been complicated and unclear, and we cannot assess how well targeted it has been. The committee is seriously concerned that the government is so far behind in its preparations." Anyone required to self-isolate due to contact with someone who has had a positive test for coronavirus or as a result of quarantine rules on arrival from overseas will need to do so for 10 days following updated clinical advice. Currently, the self-isolation period for international travellers and for contacts of positive cases in Scotland is 14 days, but this will change from Monday. Following a review of the latest evidence and discussions between the 4 UK chief medical officers, they are now confident that the self-isolation period can be reduced to 10 days. The change takes effect from this Monday, the 14th of December. Scotland's Climate Change Secretary Rosanna Cunningham has urged the UK government to set out detailed new climate change policies at this weekend's Climate Ambition Summit with the United Nations. Calling for the UK government to act in areas of reserved responsibility, including on energy regulation, the gas grid, and on new green technologies, Ms Cunningham said that action must accompany ambition if they are to show real leadership on climate change ahead of the Glasgow COP26 summit. The Scottish Government Climate Change Plan update, due to be published this month, will set out the practical steps that will be taken to meet Scotland's world-leading climate targets. It would also set out the action urgently required of the UK government in reserved areas. Black employees at Lloyds Bank are paid nearly a fifth less on average than their colleagues, according to an ethnicity pay gap report published by the bank. The median pay gap for black staff was 19.7%, while the gap for all black, Asian and minority ethnic employees was 14.8%. Lloyds said the ethnicity pay gaps at the company reflected a lack of BAME staff employed at a senior level, and not employees of different ethnicities receiving different pay for the same role. Companies globally have grappled with concerns over racial inequality this year in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, including issues such as pay and representation, particularly at senior levels. Reporting on ethnicity pay gaps by companies is voluntary in the UK, unlike for gender pay gaps, and still relatively rare, although more businesses have committed to disclosing figures or have done so, such as energy giant Royal Dutch Shell. Norway may close access to its fishing waters to European and British vessels from the 1st of January, its fisheries minister said today, because the trilateral fisheries deal Oslo wants with the EU and the UK is not yet concluded. Norway, which is not part of the European Union but is part of the European single market, negotiates with the European Union about access to each other's waters. Following the UK's vote to leave the EU, Oslo must also negotiate with London over reciprocal access. In September, Norway and the UK concluded a bilateral fisheries deal hailed as a crucial step forward by Britain's chief Brexit negotiator. But before any bilateral deals can kick in, Oslo wants a trilateral deal between Norway, the EU and the UK in place, and negotiations on this are not yet concluded, according to Fisheries and Seafood Minister Odd Emil Ingebrigtsen. The new mass membership organisation for supporters of Scottish independence has begun detailed preparations for a full public launch in early 2021. The 15-person interim national committee is meeting virtually twice a week, supported by a growing number of technical committees staffed by volunteers from across Scotland. The National Committee has elected well-known activists Gillian Mayer and George Kerrivan as co-conveners of the new body. Kerrivan is the former SNP MP for East Lothian and author of Catalonia Reborn. The National Committee also includes SNP MP Angus Brendan McNeill, Dr Ian Grant of the Scottish Independence Foundation, and former diplomat Craig Murray. The new grassroots campaigning organisation was launched at an assembly of independence supporters held online last month. The assembly was initiated by All Under One Banner, the volunteer body responsible for organising some of the largest political marches ever seen in Scotland. New funding of £750,000 will help the NUS Scotland and more than 30 student associations to provide vital welfare support for students in colleges and universities. The money will help build online student communities, increase membership engagement, and develop public health and well-being messaging. It will also help further provide support for students, especially international students, who will be remaining in accommodation or who are experiencing isolation over the winter break, and to build the capacity of college associations. NUS Scotland and student associations will work closely with their institutions to ensure these activities complement those funded by the additional £1.32 million in this financial year for student mental health support, announced by the First Minister last month. Almost £6 million in funding will provide friendship and human connection to people at risk of social isolation and loneliness over the winter months. Part of the Scottish Government's £100 million winter package to support people, the funding will ensure services such as wellbeing calls, befriending support, advice and volunteering are maintained and extended over winter. Through the Connecting Scotland programme, an extra £4.3 million will help 5,000 older people to get online and around 200 families to maintain contact with a loved one in prison custody through digital devices and internet access. More than £1.6 million will go to organisations providing key helplines for groups such as older people and victims of domestic abuse. Over £900,000 will go to various other projects across Scotland, supporting people of all ages affected by social isolation and loneliness. Transport Secretary Michael Matheson has stressed the importance of checking travel regulations and booking in advance for any travel over the festive period. All 11 local authority areas in Level 4 will today move to Level 3 restrictions, and as part of these measures, non-essential retail businesses can reopen. People are being encouraged to carefully consider their need to travel over the festive period, and if they do decide to travel, to book in advance. Travel restrictions continue to be a vital part of keeping the country safe. Nobody in a Level 3 area should travel outside their local authority area except for very specific purposes, and no one should travel into Level 3 or 4 areas unless for similar specific purposes. So that is all of our headlines for now, and now we go to the interview that I conducted a wee bit earlier with Elaine Whyte from the Clyde Fishermen's Association and Kirsten Oswald MP. So I am joined now by two excellent guests. Firstly, by Elaine Whyte of the Clyde Fishermen's Association. Elaine, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Kenny, hope you're well too.
I'm not bad. And on the other side of me, we have Kirsten Oswald, the MP for East Renfrewshire, and the SNP's Deputy Westminster Group Leader. How are you doing today, Kirsten?
Not too bad, Kenny. Hope you're doing all right as well.
Well, I'm doing okay, to be fair, although I suspect a lot of people won't be. As we know, Boris Johnson has now said that no deal is very likely. So, Kirsten, I think if I could come to you first on this, what is the situation at Westminster just now? Is there panic, or is there, a sense of sort of inevitability about what's happening now?
Do you know, like everything else, it's difficult to say, Kenny, because nobody knows what's going to happen, which is remarkable, really. If you think about it, it's pretty much a year since we had that general election, which Boris Johnson fought on the basis of his oven-ready deal. There was going to be no deal easier in the history of the whole world, and here we are, a full year later, and it looks like we're careering right down the cliff to no deal, and the only possible way that won't happen is if we career right down the cliff edge to a really poor deal. So it's, I think, difficult for anyone to say exactly what's going to happen, because I'm pretty sure that Boris Johnson himself doesn't know exactly what's going to happen. There doesn't appear to be any planning in particular that has been done actually since the Brexit referendum itself. It's an extraordinary situation. It would be unbelievable, but unfortunately it's all too easy to believe. And I think that it's particularly disappointing and galling that we now hear Boris Johnson selling this potential no deal to us, singing the praises of a no deal to us, when we know, all of us know, that it's not something that is going to be good for Scotland. And, realistically, the other alternative of a poor deal is going to be pretty poor for Scotland too. So whatever happens, and we will have to be right up to the wire, I dare say, it's not going to be a positive outcome.
Yeah, and Kirsten, obviously the SNP group can't affect very much about this deal. Boris Johnson has a fairly substantial majority. But is there anything that you would do here? Is it, for example, the case that you would vote for any deal now to avoid the chaos of a no deal? Or would you kind of do you think that the chaos is inevitable anyway, and there's no point in you even perhaps voting at all on a deal?
I think the chaos is certainly inevitable, whatever happens, and it's very difficult because, of course, we don't know what Boris Johnson is going to bring back, and as I said, Boris Johnson himself doesn't know what he's going to bring back, whether that's no deal, whether it's some kind of deal, who knows? So it's not really particularly easy or sensible, actually, to try and predict that because we just simply can't say what is going to happen, but regrettably, we can say that it's not going to be good, whatever happens. So we need to wait and see. We're in that holding pattern like everybody else, wondering what on earth is coming next. And, once we know what that is, then we're better placed to try and deal with that. But, it's pretty clear that neither his cabinet nor his party nor his advisors know any better either what's coming down the track. And I think that, given that we're on the 11th of December now, that is deeply concerning.
Now, Elaine, I'd like to come to you. We've spoken to you a couple of times recently about Brexit and how that's affecting you and your members. But the last time we spoke, you did talk about how COVID had been affecting your members' markets. A lot of what your members sell goes to the continent, of course. So I wondered, are the queues that we're already seeing at Dover, are those kinds of things affecting your members right now?
I think, well, what's happened, it depends on what you're fishing for. We've certainly seen our scallop fishermen, a lot of our local scallop fishermen have been tied up almost entirely as Central Belt is closed, Glasgow and Edinburgh restaurants and whatnot. So their market's been very challenging. I think in terms of Nefrops, we've seen a slight improvement. But yeah, I mean, we're still incredibly worried. We do know that there are working groups looking at the short straits in terms of transporting seafood, but we're not actually on them at the moment. We hope to get on them, given about 86% of our produce goes to the EU. So those are some of the issues that we are worried about. Yes, of course, we worry about the transport, and we very much worry about the paperwork process and the inspections too.
Now, you mentioned these kinds of working groups and whatnot. What has communication been like from the UK government, either advising you what to expect or asking for your opinions and for your what you would need from a deal?
Well, there has been communication with the UK government and with the Scottish government. We keep in contact with them both regularly. We have to do that. It's very important for all of our members. So we are getting communications, but as Kirsty said, it's very unsure at the moment what's going to happen for, even the politicians can't tell you. Northern Irish protocol at the moment is only in principle still as well. So, everything could change in the day. It has already over the last few months.
Now, when it comes to fishing in Scotland, the West Coast seems a wee bit like the poor relation. A lot more focus gets given to the Northeast fleet. And I wonder, what do you make of that? Have you been talking to your colleagues in the Northeast? Are they in a similar position to you now, or are they kind of a wee bit happier about how things have shaken out?
I think the best measure of that is to check social media, see the signs that are coming out of some of the larger federations. I think they're hoping not to have a sellout, and they're pushing very much to the zero opportunity line, but I can't speak for any other organisations. We, for ourselves, are just trying to make sure that we have a market that is functional and going forward, because even if there are new opportunities coming into Scotland as a whole, it will only benefit us if our fleet and our industry manages to survive the next few weeks, months.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, have you done any sort of forecasts on how much damage Brexit will do to you, and with a no deal or some sort of deal? Has any of that sort of work been quantified?
Well, Fergus Ewan has set up a resilience group looking specifically at shellfish, and we do have a member from FIFA who is from the Western Isles on that group, which is very helpful, and he works with us very closely. So I think the Scottish Government are making the best steps they can to improve resilience, but I do think, very much as Kirsty says, it's just going to depend on how things go. We've always been very much worried about direct action. If our paperwork isn't right, we just may be turned away. So these things are all going to unfold in the next few weeks potentially. We just don't know.
And then even if a deal was done tomorrow, for example, would you have time, do you think, to adapt properly, to get all that paperwork in order, to get the licenses for truckers and whatnot? Is that all that possible, do you think, in the 2 and a bit weeks we've got left?
Who knows? But I think we have grave concerns, and we've expressed those for quite some time. It seems that the last 4 years has almost flew by in the sense of what we practically know could happen after. I mean, some of the live systems in terms of exporting won't go live, I think, until the 29th of December. I think that's right. And obviously, we started on the 1st of January, so that's not giving the systems much time to work. So we really don't know. In terms of transport, again, we can't tell. We suspect that there will be delays. And if there's direct action on the French side, yes, we're extremely worried. We don't know how to mitigate that.
Now, I'd like to ask both of you this. So, Elaine first, how did fishing become this totemic issue in the Brexit process? I mean, not to disrespect your members or anyone, but fishing is a relatively small part of the economy, and it does seem odd that the whole deal may fall down because some deal can't be done on fish. How did fishing, do you think, get to become such an important issue?
Well, I think the important thing to say is that our members haven't been strong and rhetoric in as much as we have a mixed membership. So we come at it from a very practical point of view in terms of we need to look at the best and worst scenarios in every option. So that's the approach that we've taken. I do think that the common fisheries policy hasn't worked very well for coastal communities, and that actually domestic in some respects, and domestic policy hasn't worked excellently in hybrid over the years, and that's a lot to do with the selling of quota, the privatisation of quota, the consolidation of quota. Some of it's domestic, some of it's related to common fisheries policy. We all are aware of this. I think for the practical fisherman who's out at sea, they just want to maybe see a return to how to kind of simpler life, to opportunities to allow young people to be able to go out and buy a boat and work sustainably in a coastal fleet. That's not happening. It's not all to do with the EU. Like I said, it's some domestic policies. But I do think that industry has suffered considerably over the last few decades. So that may have drove some people to make decisions that I can't say. We have members who vote in all different ways. However, what I would say is if you go to somewhere like Norway and you see how important their coastal fleets are to them all around the coast, not in just one area, all around the coast, I think it's clear that we have lost something. And certainly, I would like to see coastal communities and fishing communities, reinvigorated. And I think certainly a lot of fishermen felt that there's a better way to do this. But that's down to domestic policy as well.
Okay, well, I'll turn to Kirsten then. Kirsten, the SNP obviously for years has said that the common fisheries policy wasn't good for Scotland. So, what's your feeling about the way that fishing has taken such a high priority in these talks, where it's become such a big issue, when, as I said, it's such a small part of the economy overall?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and that I mean the EU is an important market for our fishermen, and it's true. I guess that it's not something that directly affects everyone's lives. That's certainly the case. But as someone who grew up on the coast in the vicinity of a large number of fishing boats, I appreciate the importance of fishing. However, that isn't the only sticking point. There are a number of very significant sticking points, and there have been throughout the discussions between the UK government and the EU, and these are the ones that are still tripping us up. So, really, I think that it's a much broader picture than this one issue, important though it is. And, I think that has unfortunately bedeviled the whole of the the period since the EU referendum, that there has actually been one thing after another, where the UK government have tied themselves up in knots, and that doesn't help fishermen, it doesn't help any of the people involved in logistics, it doesn't help our food and drinks industry. And at the end of all of this, whenever that comes, it's going to be pretty soon now, whatever the date of the final stop being pushed on all of this. I think it is really concerning for, whether it's the fishing industry or the food and drink industry, whether it's any other industry, or the people here who are, concerned about either labour or concerned about things coming in. We're still all in this position where we're going round and round in circles, simply waiting for the thing to stop so that we can see what kind of challenges we're left with. All we know at the moment is that there will be plenty of them.
Now, Kirsten, there was one small positive in all of this week, in that the UK and the EU agreed on the operation of the Northern Ireland Protocol that had been a kind of dispute for a wee while. They've finally managed to agree that. Now, it does mean that Northern Ireland has a very unique place. It's still effectively going to be in the EU while still being a part of the UK. Now, Ruth Davidson famously said she would resign in that circumstance. Setting that aside for the moment, how does the SNP respond to this fact that Scotland is now going to be at a competitive disadvantage to Northern Ireland?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think that we should take absolutely nothing away from the particular position that Northern Ireland sits in. It's important that we do acknowledge that, and I think it's well understood that there are good reasons for that position existing. But quite separately to that, there is that other point that if this is something that is available to and possible for Northern Ireland, then why on earth is it not available to and possible for Scotland? And it's certainly very clear that the Scottish Government have been very active and pressing at all points along this road for discussion, for dialogue, for compromise, in ways that would have made this possible for Scotland also. And so that does leave us in a really challenging position, where in Scotland we are at a relative disadvantage. We do have to deal with a situation which is the opposite of what we voted for. So that is a different position to either England or Wales, or in fact Northern Ireland, who then have the best of both worlds, if you can look at it that way. So I think it is a significant issue for us, because the people in Scotland and our businesses really do deserve to be considered in the way that Northern Ireland has been. And at the moment that is missing. So, that is a matter of deep concern.
Now, I want to turn back to Elaine now. And Elaine, Northern Ireland isn't so very far from the waters that your members fish in. Is it going to be the case now that it's better for fishermen to have their boats registered in Northern Ireland, and then perhaps to get their products processed in Northern Ireland, because there will then be easier access to the EU? Is this going to drag fishermen away from Scotland?
In a word, we're very worried that yes, that would be the case. We've raised this a number of times. We go back to the point that the Northern Ireland Protocol is green principle, and it has more or less been agreed before and changed over the last few months. So we still don't know what might happen. Kirsty's right in as much as they have a framework group which is looking at all of these issues, which other regions just don't have, Scotland doesn't have, and very much to do with. So in terms of what's happening at the moment, it's much easier to do business in Northern Ireland by the way things stand. Business rates are lower. They're not going to have the same export conditions. They're certainly not going to have the same tariffs, we don't think. Seafood is actually negotiated separately. It's not an automatic one, but we imagine it will have parity with everything else that's being exported. Currently, the Scottish fleet, a lot of the Scottish fleet who are involved in the tails market, which is prawn tails at Scampi, already send they land to Scotland, and they already send their produce to Northern Ireland to be processed, and then it comes back to Scotland or somewhere else in the UK. So we don't know if we're going to be facing tariffs, delays in exports, checks. We certainly know we'll have checks. Anything that is of animal origin will have that. So in terms of the process being rather unwieldy. Yes, it's going to be unwieldy. Will it put Scotland at a disadvantage? I expect greatly so.
So how does the industry kind of cope with that? Is there a way that your members can fight back, can kind of protect their patch, if you like?
Well, I guess what we're doing now and trying to spread that message and speaking to politicians, but a lot of this is out with our hands. We're trying our hardest to shape policy, influence policy. I agree with Kirsty, we understand the special nature of Northern Ireland. We certainly don't wish them any ill as our fishing, some of them are our cousins and whatnot. But it is a ridiculous situation that somebody is fishing maybe 5-6 miles off of Campbelltown, already earning double what the Scottish boats would earn, better business rates, and now they're not going to have tariffs and easier exports to the EU market from fishing in Scottish waters. That can't be right.
And this may sound like a very ignorant question, but bear in mind, I didn't grow up near the coast. I don't know much about fishing at all. But is business quieter during the winter anyway? Would this be a quiet period for you anyway, to then look at maybe the summer when things get busier, or is this a particularly busy time of the year for you?
Well, we do have Christmas markets. Obviously, there's a Christmas market. Usually, we have a lot of produce going to Spain, etc. But the winter months are usually quieter, just from the point of view that the weather isn't great. So normally, what happens with the West Coast fleets is that they fish during the summer. They build up a resilience in terms of economics, so they have a little bit of a pot to see them pass the winter and the bad weather. Obviously, there's absolutely no resilience. With our mobile prawn boats, the small mobile prawn boats around the coast, their income is down about on average 50%. So they don't have that resilience at all due to COVID. So yeah, who knows? Certainly they're not in a great place. It's a perfect storm.
And just before I go back to Kirsten again, what has the support been like for fishermen from the UK government and the Scottish government due to COVID?
Well, the Scottish government has supported our fleet. As you know, they gave hardship grants a few months ago, so that was very much appreciated. Fergus Ewan has set up the resilience group to help, particularly shellfish fleets inshore. So that's been very helpful, and I hope that will be productive because I think there are a lot of infrastructural issues that we have to think about in terms of even changing. The UK government has definitely kept in contact. They've let us know about options that may be available in terms of crew, things like that. But as Kirsty says, we still don't know how things are going to work out. So it's limited until how much we can plan.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kirsty, I will come back to you now. We talked a wee bit about this at the top of the show, but is there anything now that the SNP group or the Scottish government can do to mitigate things if we are headed for no deal? Is there anything that you can do that can make the impact easier on people like Elaine and her members and frankly all of us?
Elaine touched on a really important point. She spoke about resilience in terms of the group that Fergus Ewing is working with, and that's not a situation which only impacts on that group. So the Scottish Government's actually doing a significant amount of resilience work at the moment, which I suspect we're all grateful for, given this really uncertain situation. And the other thing that Elaine said, which I think is really timely and important, is that this is all, of course, coming at the same time as we're in the midst of COVID. This couldn't be a more challenging time. So resilience in terms of COVID and resilience in terms of Brexit are going hand in hand at the moment. And, no matter the significant work that is being put into that, and it is a daily, a daily effort, these challenges are nonetheless extremely difficult ones. So, I think that, while we will continue to do all that we can, and, we heard about the support for businesses, particular businesses having specific sectoral support that the Scottish Government has put in, that's important, and that's a continued job of work also. But this unknown, this great unknown factor about where we're going to be, all we know is that it's going to be very challenging, makes it really difficult for us to put into place proper organised provisions. And the fact that the Scottish Government has routinely and consistently throughout this period been locked out of discussions also makes that doubly difficult. It's very hard to put into place mitigating measures when you don't really know what you're mitigating against. So, the next few days and it's not even a few weeks, the next couple of weeks are going to be difficult and challenging. But unfortunately, getting to that end of the year period isn't going to see an end to that challenge. There will be more significant challenges up ahead. Regrettably, we just don't know exactly what they are going to be yet.
And Kirsten, we're just about out of time. So I just want to ask you, what impact do you think a no-deal Brexit is going to have on the movement towards independence? Do you think it's going to make people more kind of urgent about independence, or do you think it's likely to make people a wee bit frightened of this scale of constitutional change if no deal is the horrible disaster we all expect it to be?
I think all of the Brexit situation actually is causing people to think again about independence. So people who had not been convinced previously that independence was the right choice for Scotland are much more open, having seen the fact that Scotland is not having a choice about this. So, and I know that your viewers will know this, but we didn't choose Brexit. That wasn't what we chose. Our government has been locked out of these discussions. That's not reasonable, by anybody's standards. So I think that people are actually looking at it through the lens of, we have an opportunity here to do something different and something better, to be that outward-looking European country that Scotland is. So, it is a challenging period of time, but, it's very clear that even for those people who may have in the past favoured the status quo, that status quo has up and gone. That doesn't exist anymore. So the choices that we will have are going to be very clear ones between this Brexit UK that is going in on itself and the choice of an outward-looking independent Scotland, and the chance to make our own choices and make the right choices for Scotland. And I don't think it's a great surprise that more and more people are recognising that that is the way forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, just before we do wrap up, I wanted to come back to you, Elaine. Quite apart from just buying more West Coast fish, is there anything that our viewers can do to help you and your members in making your voices heard on these issues?
No, just keep tuning in, keep understanding the nuances in the debates. I think, yes, certainly buy local. I think speak to fishermen. If reach out to us, we have a web page, we have a Facebook. Reach out to us and ask us questions, because certainly a lot of the inshore fleets are under a lot of pressure, not just because of COVID and Brexit, but we have a lot of lobbyists and various other. There's a lot of issues. And the best thing to do is to speak to your local fishermen, the family fishermen. Speak to them. Reach out to us. We're happy to field any inquiries that you may have.
Great. Well, Elaine, I'm sure some of our viewers will be doing that, but thank you to both Kirsten Oswald and Elaine Whyte for joining us today. So that was my conversation with Elaine Whyte and Kirsten Oswald earlier today, and we'd just like to thank both of them for sparing their time for us. We'd also like to thank you at home for joining us. There would be no point in us making these shows at all if not for you, so thank you very much for being with us. As many of you will know, we are running a crowdfunder right now. Our goal is to raise enough money to employ a full-time editor and some full-time journalists here at Broadcasting Scotland to help us professionalise our output, increase the range of stories we can cover, and increase the way that we improve the way that we cover those stories as well. So if you're able to help support that, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register to sign up as a regular supporter, or /donate if you would like to just make a one-off donation. Either would be very, very welcome. If you're not able to support us financially, we do understand, and the shows will always be free to view online, but you can still make a big difference for us by supporting us in other ways, by following us on Twitter @BroadcastScot, by liking our Facebook page, subscribing to our YouTube channel, and then using those to share these shows around with your friends and family. Your word of mouth is by far the best way for us to get the word out about what Broadcasting Scotland does and where we are. So do please let people know that you watch Broadcasting Scotland and hopefully you can encourage one or two of your friends to join you. And finally, we have talked, of course, about employing staff, but we will also need more volunteers, particularly when it comes to covering next year's election. We would like to be in every count across the country, and we will need volunteers to help with that. We can provide equipment, we can provide training, but we can't necessarily get to every count with the number of volunteers that we have available to us now. So if you're interested in getting involved in that way or in doing anything else involved with broadcasting here at the channel, we would be delighted to hear from you. But that is absolutely all we have time for this evening. Maggie, will be back on Sunday. Almost forgot her name there. But Maggie will be back with you on Sunday for the Full Scottish at noon. And then Gordon will be back on Monday evening with another Scotland at 7. But until then, thanks very much for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we'll play you out with our fundraising video. Thanks a lot.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
An independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.